But whoever holds this hammer, if he be worthy, shall possess the power of thought.
Odin, Marvel Comics. Hello again, I'm Mike from the Lorebreakers, and I'm back once again just to have a little post-cast chat to expand a little more on about the topics of our weekly ramblings. This week, weapons. Gun swords, god blades, soul reapers, blades that can cleave the world in two, and firearms to pierce the heavens themselves. Or maybe it's just that same old battered rusty blade. You know, the one that every young fighter carries with them the day they choose to leave home for the first time, ready to face the first adventure of their story. Weapons in fiction have almost a romantic relationship together. We can scarcely separate ourselves from them. Every hero seems to have his legendary sword, or villain the cursed staff of office. Even Sherlock Holmes had his famous Webley revolver that he was scarcely separated from. So, where to begin? Honestly, I was struggling a little on this one. Weapons represent such a grand and diverse topic to discuss that when it comes to creative fiction, it becomes pretty difficult to break it down and talk about them in any meaningful way without just giving vague generalizations. How do we discuss them? So I've decided I'm going to completely ignore the hard work and I'm just going to do it like this. We'll look at a few different ways that weapons can be utilised in fiction and try and build an example that uses them. This list is by no means exhaustive, so go right ahead, there are countless ways they can be used in fiction. But just for the first one, let's talk about using them as plot devices. So, when we talk about this kind of thing, a term that crops up a lot in discussion is the term McGuffin. McGuffins are defined as an object that exists to drive the plot forwards, but in that it doesn't actually serve any significant purpose beyond that. Take Excalibur, for example. The sword isn't actually King Arthur's primary weapon for the bulk of his story, and in fact, it's actually the sheath of the weapon that provides all the fancy magic and enchantments, rather than the sword itself. It serves to appoint King Arthur to his role, to enable his plot to make sense and develop to the next arc. Little more, to be honest. That's why it's a MacGuffin. Anyway, to focus on the point, I'm not going to be talking about MacGuffins. Not that there's anything wrong with them, but plot device weapons or plot weapons don't have to stop there. Give them vital roles in a story and a bit of influence on the outcome, see where it takes you. Let them throw a spanner in the works and offer a genuine pivot point on which the story can revolve around, or just a source of plot twists outside the agency of our characters to throw them a curveball and give them something to work with. So, an example. The Lance of the Nine Kings has been stolen from the royal vaults. This legendary artifact, the monarch's very symbol of power, is, according to legend, able to twist the very skeins of fate to guide its bearer to an ancient temple filled with the wealth of 1,000,000 conquered realms. The spear itself doesn't slay better than anything else. Its carrier is just as vulnerable to a stray bullet as a normal person, but immediately it should be obvious this weapon is going to be the focal point of the story the plot's going to revolve around. The way it manipulates the world, motivations, all to place the villainous burglar exactly where he needs to be, which is much to the frustration of our protagonists who would be hunting him for whatever reasons they may have. But it's important to note that this happens that only so long as the spear remains in his possession. Let the burglar lose it from time to time, see how the dynamic of the chase can change. How will our heroes react when they finally get their hands on it? When they're suddenly confronted with that very same temptation of wealth and power that drew our antagonist to begin with. Initially, quite well, but will the spear be so willing to take no for an answer? Will it, like the one ring, bloody hell, from Soul, or Soul Edge from Soul Calibur, will it try and enact a degree of agenda of its own to spite our protagonist's intentions? Why? What does the spear have to gain from that? Could be an interesting point to explore. How you choose to explain the source of this weapon and its significance will likely remain purely a matter of hearsay and, rumour until our heroes arrive for that final confrontation in the ancient temple. What will it be? A gift from the gods? aliens, a magical cat looking to cause mischief by offering contracts to ancient kings in exchange for the power to fight witches. Could be any of the above, or, who knows. Could be a divine alien cat god from another dimension offering contracts to ancient monarchs in exchange for fighting evil Lovecraftian super witches. It's an idea to play with, and definitely it sort of shows how you can really form a plot around a particular item or weapon, while also giving it a bit more than just being the key to the king, the key to the treasury, the tool for taking the throne. Just give it a bit more interest. I mean, make it a character in of itself if you want to. But I'm just gonna leave this one here for now. So, any ideas for expanding upon it yourself? Drop it into the comments. I'd love to read them. So, let's look at another way it could be used. Let's try weapons as an extension of the character. So, what do I mean by this? Certain characters are defined by the weapon they wield. It's almost impossible to separate them. Sometimes it's even more iconic than the character themselves. Take Mjolnir, the Hammer of Thor, Kratos and his Blades of Chaos, or Dante's Rebellion. What is Captain America without his shield, and who is Iron Man when he takes off that giant golden suit? Weapons of this nature are effectively inseparable from their character. They're an expression of their best traits, or perhaps their worst. Very often there's a fascinating story behind how they acquired that weapon that, is just begging to be explored and every reader will be interested in. There's plenty of opportunity to tease, hint, or just straight up have it all come crawling back to bite our characters on the arse when they least expect it. Best of all, these weapons can often have a chance to grow and develop alongside our characters. They can be a physical manifestation of their growth and development as they continue along their arcs. So, let's have a look at an example. At least get one started. Our protagonist here is a superhero. Oh well, at least that's how he perceives himself. See, our hero does indeed carry a weapon. A set of claws built into leather gloves that settle neatly over the ends of his fingertips. Quite mundane at a glance, and dressed in street clothes, sure enough you could be forgiven for thinking that our protagonist, little more than any other vagabond wandering around the streets at night. Let's have these claws be a little different though from just the steel and shot that we're used to. Let's make them mutagenic. Rather than just being something to slash at an enemy's face, give these gloves the ability to transform our protagonist, either partially or completely, further down the line, into something a bit more bestial. Wolven claws and jaws, but surely this is just another werewolf transformation at a glance. Well, yes and no, and there's certainly nothing wrong with the cliche, but having the weapon be the source of the transformation means you can expand upon that a little more, throw some more twists in, and just do a little more with it. So, let's have a look. Let's look at the backstory of these wolven claws. Just, trigger warning for anyone for animal loss. Sorry, Zach. Where could a man get his hands on a set of werewolf gloves? Perhaps he, like Saitama from One Punch Man, had a coincidental run-in with a villain in the past, caught up in a battle of good and evil as an innocent bystander, and found himself suddenly alone with the monstrous villain before him. All certainly doomed, of course. Only his only companion, his old, ragged, beloved pet dog, rushed forward to defend the owner he cared for ever so much. As they both lay bleeding upon the cold paved stones, some crux of fate, or perhaps some cruelty of the villain, meant that, as the best boy gave his last sacrifice, some ounce of that suffering was transfused onto his owner. He'd ever remain haunted by his failure to protect his pet. Tormented by ethereal screams and pain whispers, a dog trapped in the dark recesses of his owner's mind. Yet, that pain wasn't all that was transferred to the man. Now, no longer fully alone within his own skull, our protagonist wants only to honour his best friend's memory by protecting others from meeting the same horrific fate they did. So that would be his claim anyway, but in truth perhaps he'd somehow acquired the same loyal, protective spirit that was shown in the final sacrifice of his beloved dog. So, what did he do with this new mentality? wielding claws made from the leather of his pet's side, tipped with his fangs and teeth. Claws, he'd burr them against anyone who stalks the streets at night with darkness in their hearts, walking, protecting, together, forever. Okay, so this is post-writing Mike realizing, shit, I think I just rewrote the opening chapters of Chainsaw Man. Anyway, so that was a little bit dark, and, you know, even though it's probably nothing compared to any average creepypasta, but perhaps got a little bit lost in the darkness somewhere along the way. So, if Zach feels like it, he can drop some, you know, spirit bleach in here, just like some royalty-free puppies or something, just as I finish talking here before moving on. An important aspect here is to think about how these weapons embody your character's best and worst aspects. With the woven claws being a physical representation of this new mentality, this loyalty, protective nature, and sort of the noble aspect in spite of the bestial outer shell. That sort of like, even if it's not, you know, directly obvious, Captain America and his you know, his and his bright shield of America, to, you know, something a little bit more indirect. Just something to think about. And honestly, not everything has to be, you know, the God Thor and his hammer of lightning. Have a toy around with it. Make it a bit more indirect and sort of see where it goes. So, just for the sake of time, I'm going to move on to the third one. And I'm only going to do the 3 here. So, 3. Weapons as a trial for our character. So, what do I mean when I say trial? So, not every tool the protagonist picks up has to be purely beneficial. I think, honestly, there's a lot to gain from introducing a cursed blade or sentient wand that challenges the fundamental principles and it threatens to inflict lasting harm upon the character. Take Grog from the first Critical Role campaign. He was introduced to the blade Craven Edge, a malicious weapon possessed of an unquenchable thirst for blood. That weapon very nearly killed the lovable barbarian when he failed to resist its tempting offers of power. You know, if only he passed that particular trial, but it goes to show how you can create some really interesting storytelling just from throwing something at your character that they initially think is a wonderful boon, but doesn't quite work out that way. So, let's try and build an example. In the kingdom try that one again. In the kingdom of Valorek, once a generation, a great tournament is held, where every youth and young adult throws themselves into eager competition. Duels, feats of strength, great hunts and greater feasts fill the capital for 6 days and 6 nights of celebration and contest. Why? Well, behind the throne of the kingdom of this great nation rests a relic, the Eye of Navarre. Now, I'm not exactly saying they're trying to impress a Nissan truck here, but this shield, for what it is said to present every single one of the deeds seen directly before the gaze of a goddess. Upon the completion of the festivities, this eye, without fail, reflects the final rays of sunlight to illuminate a single aspirant within the courtyard of the royal palace. The chosen paragon, the champion of Navarre. Now, being the paragon comes with a lot of benefits. Being a religious, heroic figure blessed by the shield with great fortune and might, clarity of mind beyond their years, and an insurmountable strength of will. Sounds pretty amazing, not counting the fact that as a champion of the nation, you're pretty much beloved by all as a guarantee. So what's the catch? Navarre is the patron goddess of many things. Competition, athletes, gambling, intellectual conversation, daring, debate, and tragedy. The kind of person it takes to impress the Eye is an individual who is driven to face any challenge, no matter what the danger or what the odds. No matter how unprepared or minor the quarry, they must face it down, no matter what. And beyond that, they must constantly be seeking some new test of their intellect, skill, and strength. This must be the person that is chosen. And this is a challenge that is constantly issued to them by the shield. What happens if they don't? Well, their gifts are reclaimed with interest, and inevitably crippling at best, or lethal at worst, punishment for one who fails to meet the expectations of the divine. So, what's the trial? It's a challenge of integrity and character. The shield is a lesson, a crutch. Most claim it for selfish reasons, and they are always the ones who wilt away the quickest. The only way to overcome the eternal challenge of the shield is not to chase the dream of looking Navarra in the eye. It's to excel and achieve in spite of her gaze. For the right reasons. Navarra's eye is a tool to drive the talented into pushing onwards beyond that horizon. The trial in of itself isn't to beat the curse. It's to make sure that when you do eventually fall prey to it, whatever you achieve, it's worth it in the end. And that's sort of the thing. Doesn't have to have a happy ending in the end. Thin Execution is a great example of a story where challenge, it seems great, but it doesn't seem to work out that well in the end. Or there's a challenging aspect there that sort of leaves a bittersweet taste in your mouth. And that's the idea of the Eye of Navarra. It's a pushing forward development, a gift that means that the most talented are constantly pushing that horizon forwards. They all perish in the end. But perhaps that's the trial. Being able to give up those selfish aspects of yourself, that love of power and wealth, to ensure that when you do eventually give up that power, you've used it for the right reasons. Or you'll just be left regretting every decision you've made up to this point. So, I'm aware I'm a little bit shy on time, so I'm actually going to stop here. Any interesting ideas for weapons of your own? Drop them down in the comments. I would love to read them. And subscribe if you want to check on when our next podcast is going to be coming out. But until then, as always, it's been a pleasure to sit here and ramble on at you all for a little while longer. This has been Mike from the Lorebreakers. See you later.